In today's video, we are going to learn how you can install SD-WAN Orchestrator in a vSphere environment. Before we proceed, I'm just going to describe or walk you through what setup do I have and where I'm going to install this VM and what are the prerequisites. All right, let's move forward and get started. The first thing that you need to do is you need to download the OBA file for your SD-WAN Orchestrator from VMware download page. All right. For my convenience, I've already downloaded this file and for you too, so you don't have to see me downloading that file. Apart from that, the prerequisite is basically you need to prepare the cloud init for this VM deployment. What does cloud init is? Cloud init package, is basically it allows you to handle the early initialization of your VMware Orchestrator instance. So there are two files that you need to create. The first is metadata that contains the host name, instance ID, and your management network interface settings. Apart from that, you have user data, which contains the password for VC admin for CLI access, and you create a super user that will have access to the GUI of your orchestrator. We're not going to talk about SSH or system properties or write files. Okay, so after you create these two files, we're going to use a GenISO image package, or I would say it's a program that actually converts those two files into an ISO image that we will use to, before we instantiate or power on the VM, we're going to attach this ISO image to that VM, and we will see how. All right. So this was the prerequisites. Let's go ahead and deploy the actual VM. I have I already have an infrastructure for my deployment. I have chosen one of the ESXi-03A, and it has a data store named as ESX VCO. I've kept this sub data store separate, but it really doesn't mean that you cannot use this shared data store for your VCO deployment. It is just my way of deploying things. Let's go ahead and deploy the virtual machine. I will locate the file, upload file. I will upload this file that I've downloaded. Okay, I'll click OK, click Next. I'll give the VCO, let's say -01 is my name of the virtual machine. And I will choose the location where I want to install this virtual machine is site A. It will choose the appropriate computer source for me. It's, if it does not, you can definitely select one which is appropriate, right? It does the compatibility check, etc. In the review details section, we will see that, it provides you the difference of, installation. If you do a, thin provision for your VM, it takes 2.1 gig. But whereas if you deploy this in, thick provision, it takes 1.1 terabyte. So for our lab purpose, we're going to use this 2.1, thin provisioned virtual machine than being thick provision because it is going to take much space in our environment. That's what we don't want. But for your production environment, you need to have 1.1 terabyte space for this deployment. Let's click Next. We'll select the storage. I'm going to select the same storage that I have already defined for this deployment. Just keep in mind that it still says thick provision. I'll just change this to thin provision. Okay. Click Next. For the bridged interface, this is going to be our management interface. So I'm going to put it inside a DV port group with inside that is created inside your VDS -02 at site A. So next thing is that if I go back to the documentation, we are going to set this instance ID as VCO01 and host name this. So just to match it, VCO will say 01 and VCO-01, right? That's going to be hostname. Eventually, this when this virtual machine starts, it is going to take that information from the file that we're going to create, but just to be in, from the deployment perspective, I'm just going to keep it same, right? Okay. So I'm not going to punch in any of the password, but definitely I would like to provide, the DNS settings. My DNS is my internal DNS server that I'm going to point it to, and I'll keep the second DNS as is. I will be imposing a static IP address, so I'll just change it to static and click next. Rest of the parameters, just keep it as default because it's going to take all that parameters from that file, and just click finish. Before we proceed further, I'm just going to, see if the deployment is actually working and not giving any error. Once it progresses, we'll move on to the next step of creating those two metadata and user data file and converting them into an ISO image. So as it is progressed to 75%, I would go back and create those files. For that, I already have, the so as I told you that, this Gen ISO image package, or I would say it's basically a program that can be run inside Linux system for creation of that ISO image, right? So you need to have a Linux system. What I am using is I'm using an Ubuntu desktop, and that Ubuntu desktop is deployed over VMware Fusion and that is running inside my MacBook Pro. So I'll just show you the desktop access, right? So this is my desktop that I've recently deployed, and it is fresh. Okay, so the first thing that what I told you was to create two files and create an ISO image out of it. Then what we will do is we are going to install Samba file server on this desktop machine so that it can share that file to my Mac OS or any different operating system. It actually allows you to share that to any different operating system, so it's not different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder inside my desktop. Let's say I'll just give it as an ISO, and I create this thing. And inside this ISO, I'm going to create different text files. So let me just create the first text file, text editor. It's okay, my bad. I'm going to put this text editor there and click escape. Okay, I'm just going to open this text editor. Let's go back to the documentation real quick. So in the documentation, what we're going to do is we're going to copy this configuration, copy it, go back to our desktop, and simply paste it. After pasting it, I would like to change the IP addresses of my machine. So what I'm going to give is .19, 192.168.19. I'll just copy and eventually I will paste, change my network, which is .0, and network mask will keep it as a default because it's /24 IP address space. And for our broadcast, I'm just going to paste and change it to 255. And of course, my gateway is going to be 192.168.110.1. So now I'm going to save this file. I'll just say save as. I'll just go to desktop, ISO, and the file name, I'll take it from the documentation itself. The file name is going to be metadata. Copy it, go back, and paste, and save. Voila, we are ready to, create a new file. All right. So this is the metadata file that I created. Let's me create another file, and I go to documentation. What I will do is I'm going to copy these parameters that I really need, go back, paste it here, and eventually I'm going to change it to default VMware one bang. I don't want to configure SSH for now. Okay, and I'm going to give the domain name and the username as Zenith Networks @corp.local, and I'm going to set the password, same password as VMware one bang. That's it. So what we're going to do is we're going to save as, going to save it inside an ISO, and this is going to be user data. All right, I can go back to the documentation to show you. It's going to be the file name as a user data. Okay, so that's where I'm going to save it. I've saved it. Now, I don't see this metadata here. I believe I've pasted it in that different location and just drop it inside ISO folder. So I'm done with creation of those two files. Okay, now what we are going to do is I'm going to launch terminal window, terminal. Inside this terminal window, I'm going to run that same command. But before doing that, I actually need to go inside the folder where those two files are. So I'll say cd iso, say dir. Okay, it's very strange. Okay, so I'm not in the desktop folder, so desktop. All right, or I would say not dir. Let's see, it'd be ls. Have the folder. I'm a bit confused, get confused, when I'm working on a Windows machine or Linux. So, okay, so I would say ls cd iso ls. Perfect. I'll just go to the documentation, and simply what I'll do is actually copy the complete command. Okay, as is, because I haven't changed any file name, etc. Kept it simple, default. And since I'm going to paste it and run this the command. And this program has created an ISO image. Let's go ahead and check if it is created or not. All right, so we have an ISO image created out of these two files. Now let's go ahead and share this desktop to our MacBook Pro. So to do that, I'm going to go to the folder. I need to go to desktop, and on this ISO, I'll just click, network share. I'll share this folder, and now it, tells me that there is a service that needs to be installed, and that is Samba service. When I click install and install, let's see if it does install. All right, perfectly fine, and it's doing its job. So after the installation, we're going to share this folder with the guest access so that I can copy this file and put it into my data store. Okay, so all right, I hope we get this installation done as soon as possible. It's taking a bit of time, I'm not sure why, but eventually it completed. So I'll just create a share. So this folder has been shared to any operating system that, within that same subnet range. So eventually what I need to do is I need to go back to my MacBook Pro. I'll just say network, and I see my Ubuntu desktop. All right, it's connecting. So I got my two files here right real quick. So what I'll do is I'll just right click and copy this file, go back to my, this infrastructure, right? So I'm going to put this file And I already have this file created because I was testing this earlier. So what I would do is, and all right, so give me a second. I would just go ahead and delete this and paste a new one that I copied from my MacBook Pro. All right, so I've copied this. Now I need to go back to, inside my this lab. I'll go to the data store, right, where I actually need to put this file. And this is where my, the VM is instantiated. So I'll upload file and would select that file, click open. All right, so here is my ISO image. Now I'll go back to the host and clusters inside my vCenter, and I can see my VM is instantiated. Now what I'll do is I will right click and go to say edit settings. Inside this settings, I would say I would like to, you know, pull in the ISO image that is stored in the data store. Here is your data store and the file. Click OK. And if I just expand this, right now it does not connect on when I power on the the VM. So I'll just use this what do you call this checkbox. All right, and click OK. Perfect. So this is what you need to do. That's all. And let's go ahead and power on this machine. So probably I need to this has already powered on. Let's see, and let's go back. Let's get into the console of your machine and see what exactly it's doing. All right, it's booting up. It was all right. So hopefully it should be ready by in few seconds. If it does not, what I would do is I would pause this video and wait for it to initialize. All right, well, before I said anything, it just came up. So what I will do is I will use the VC admin as my username and the password that I set inside that file that was metadata that was inside user data. So I'll say VMware on bang. Let's see if I have access to it. Perfect. So you have a CLI access, right? So for a GUI access, it will, it takes a little bit of time to actually initialize and, give you access to your GUI. So from the GUI perspective, if I just go ahead and see if has already initialized, I would try access to, let's say it's a vSphere. So what I do is I have not created this operator. So this is going to be my GUI, right? So GUI is still initializing, so it will take its own time. So probably maybe 3-4 minutes before I proceed. So I would stop this video and probably get back again to show you how after you log in. All right, so our GUI services has initialized on our VMware SD-WAN Orchestrator. So I've just refreshed the page and it has landed to your connection is not private. So I have no other choice to just continue right of now. I'll proceed. And here's your GUI access. So I'll use the super user or the user credentials that I created through inside user data. And that was Zenith Networks at corp.local, and my password was VMware one bank. Let's see if I have access to it. All right. So this is basically an operator in, your operator, your GUI to manage your orchestrator. You can create, new operator users, or you can create new customers, attach profiles to them, etc., etc. So this is how you actually deploy your SD-WAN Orchestrator VM inside vSphere environment. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for listening to me.